My husband cheated on me. Hiring a detective, I found out that he leads a double life, so I divorced him, and also... This tale isn't just about treachery, it's about revealing a complex web of deceit that runs deeper than anyone could ever fathom. Imagine if the person you trusted most was living a double life. How far would you go to uncover the truth? A few weeks ago, on a seemingly typical Thursday morning, I found myself ensnared in the usual chaos of preparing our two kids for school at 6:30 a.m. The uproar was momentarily paused by the sudden ringing of the phone, sparking my curiosity about who would call at such an early hour. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar area code, which only heightened my interest. "Hello?" I answered cautiously, bringing the phone to my ear. To my astonishment, it was my husband, Robert, on the other end. I was puzzled why he would be calling since we had just spoken the previous night. Robert works for a small advertising firm, and his call immediately caught my attention. I handle the household and work remotely, while he's always busy with a printing company downtown. Despite our different schedules, we make it work and live comfortably. We reside in a charming suburban house with 3 bedrooms and a garden, enjoying a wide circle of friends. Robert told me that the previous night, while in the hotel lobby to grab a newspaper, his wallet was stolen. "Please cancel our credit cards immediately and request new ones as soon as possible. I've already informed my boss, Sarah, and she's arranging for new company cards to be sent to me overnight so I can have them before I leave tomorrow. She's also transferring some funds to help me get by," he said, sounding worried. "You're usually very cautious with your belongings. What happened?" I asked. I was distracted and left my wallet at the cashier's counter while picking up some reading material. When I returned, it was gone. The cashier said she was busy with another customer and didn't notice anything unusual. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel staff is checking the nearby dumpsters. I hope they find it otherwise. I might have to rely on a taxi for today's meeting. Don't worry, I'll handle the credit cards right away. Sorry about the trouble. Hopefully, apart from the $1,500 in your wallet, we won't incur any more expenses. We can replace the other cards gradually. Luckily, most of my essentials are still in the room, so I'll be ready for the morning presentation. How are the kids? I miss us being together, Robert said. 6 weeks ago, I managed to cancel the credit cards before any unauthorized charges were made. However, the wallet with Robert's driver's license and other non-credit card items has yet to be found, so I pushed that worry aside. Life continued as usual, but today I discovered something significant. I found a statement from Robert's investment account, where he keeps a separate fund from the inheritance he received after his parents' tragic accident a few years ago. I've always respected his privacy with this account, but while searching for our home insurance policy, I stumbled upon a folder with monthly statements from his account. I remembered that the inheritance was around $300,000 after his parents passed, and I wondered how much it had grown. To my pleasant surprise, it had increased to over $400,000. While reviewing the statement, I noticed a withdrawal of $5,000 from the money market account about 6 weeks ago. My curiosity was piqued about how he had used that money, so I decided to investigate further into his money market account. To my surprise, I found that he had written a substantial check to a local electronics store just a few days after losing his wallet in the same city. I wondered what he could have bought at that store. He hadn't mentioned buying anything for me, and I hadn't heard him talk about purchasing anything for anyone else. Although he has a sister, I couldn't understand why she would need a $5,000 gift. After some thought, I decided to visit the store's website on my computer and noted down their phone number for further inquiry. I picked up the phone and dialed the store's number. A woman introduced herself as a store representative and asked how she could help. After providing my name and specifying the transaction I wanted to inquire about, I explained that we had encountered an issue with the purchase and wondered if there was a store warranty. She looked up the transaction on her computer and then asked about the nature of the problem with the items. I was momentarily puzzled, wondering what kind of items he could have bought. Fortunately, the woman on the phone quickly clarified, "Oh, I remember this purchase." When he visited our store, he was visibly distressed and mentioned that his laptop and tablet had been stolen. He wanted to replace them, which proved to be quite a challenging task. While we were searching for suitable options, he used the company's credit card as collateral and later sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you have mentioned the issue with the items, I would like to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty for such situations. Is it possible that the devices are malfunctioning? This was confusing because Robert had spoken of replacing his laptop and tablet, but never mentioned losing them, only the theft of his wallet. It took me some time to process this new information. Listen, I told the woman on the phone. I need to discuss this with my husband before making any further decisions. I'll get back to you later. With that, I ended the call. While she seemed somewhat puzzled, my confusion was much greater. It was becoming increasingly clear that the devices should have been in his wallet when it was stolen. But why would he carry them if he didn't want to hide his work status from others? To the best of my knowledge, there were no professional constraints related to revealing one's employment status. However, if he wanted to appear unoccupied in certain social situations, disturbing thoughts began to circulate in my mind, suggesting that he might have been contemplating an affair while away from home. The mere idea made my stomach turn. We had been married for 9 years and were blessed with 2 wonderful children, David, age 7, and Lisa, age 5. I believed we had a perfect marriage and a picture-perfect family. Our personal life seemed fulfilling to me, or at least that is what I had thought. Robert traveled once a month, staying for 2 or 3 nights in distant cities. If he harbored intentions of such actions, he might have seen it as a discreet opportunity. It seemed that losing the devices had deeply troubled him, leading him to opt for replacements that closely resembled the originals. I had bought those devices with my modest earnings, so they were not extravagant, and crafting a near replica was not too costly. He could have reported the loss to the insurance company, but I probably would have found out. If his wallet was genuinely stolen at the hotel, he should have reported it. I wondered what he claimed was missing. I decided to locate the hotel's contact number and made the call. I asked about any records related to the theft of my husband's wallet. Surprisingly, they confirmed having a written report of the incident. I requested a copy to be faxed to me and received it shortly. The report was composed and signed by Robert himself. In the statement, Robert mentioned that his wallet was stolen while he was attending a conference in the hotel ballroom. He had left his wallet at the booth where he was seated, and when he returned, it had vanished. Remarkably, Robert explicitly noted his hesitation to involve the police. As I absorbed this information, my thoughts raced, overwhelmed by the implications of what I had uncovered. He had deceived me not only by concealing the truth about the stolen devices, but also by inventing a story about shoplifting. While there could be an alternative explanation, my mind could not come up with anything other than the unsettling thoughts swirling in my head. It became clear that I needed to understand the significance of losing those devices, or else they would persistently occupy my thoughts and drive me to madness. One thing was increasingly evident: those devices were inside his wallet when he was attending the conference with an unknown person. Several weeks had passed since the incident, and he was about to embark on another trip in a few days. I realized I needed to gather more details about his upcoming trip. I wanted to understand what he typically did in the evenings when he was away. If he was involved with other people, perhaps losing the devices had served as a wake-up call, prompting him to reassess his behavior. I knew that if I discovered his infidelity, it would likely spell the end of our marriage, though I dreaded considering how it might affect our children. He was undoubtedly a great father, but I could not bear the thought of him having custody of the kids, especially with his frequent business trips. My mind raced, desperately seeking any potential clues to shed light on his faithfulness. What other information might hint at his actions during his trips? Did he engage in unprotected encounters or insist on using contraceptives? I assumed he would opt for protection because he would not want to risk bringing home infections or the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy. After all, I had a vasectomy after the birth of our second child, making pregnancy impossible. He could not rely on the people he met to have protection, so he must have had his supply. One question remained: where did he keep them? It was unlikely he stored them at our house or in the car, so the office seemed the most likely place. He probably carried them with him on business trips. I knew he transported his work papers, laptop, and presentation materials in a large briefcase he kept in his office. But if he had an early morning flight, he'd bring his bag home the night before and then pack it in a suitcase for the airport. This detail was crucial. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before his departure. I hoped his next trip involved an early morning flight. I made a deliberate choice to remain calm and composed, not displaying any signs that something was amiss. As it happened, when the kids returned from school, I was occupied with various tasks and had little time to dwell on my suspicions. Nonetheless, the specter of his infidelity continued to linger in the back of my mind. When Robert returned from work, I found myself in a bit of a mess. While preparing dinner, I accidentally spilled a dish of beans, creating a mess on the floor. The resulting chaos of cleaning up and managing the kids' activities left me looking somewhat disheveled. Fortunately, he didn't seem to notice any unusual behavior from me at that moment. After the commotion settled and everything was cleaned up, I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. We sat down at the table as we normally did to enjoy dinner and engage in our typical chit-chat. Given our usual routine, I didn't expect him to have any growing suspicions about his upcoming trip. "So, you're heading out on another trip in a couple of days?" I asked. "Yes," he replied with little enthusiasm. "It's the same old routine. I'm not looking forward to it." My curiosity prompted me to dig deeper. "If you don't enjoy it, have you considered applying for a different role? You've been with the company for quite some time and have a good understanding of various aspects of its operations. I think you could adapt to almost any position." He mentioned his desire to gain more experience before transitioning to a desk job. However, I gently appealed to his conscience regarding the kids and me. "I miss you when you're not home," I added, hoping to evoke a sense of guilt. "I know." "I'm sorry," he responded sympathetically. "I miss all of you too." Seeking more details, I continued, "So where exactly are you headed this time? Will you be leaving in the morning, giving us a chance to spend some time together before your departure?" I held his gaze, mindful that our children could hear us. Despite trying to appear normal, my anxiety was evident as my stomach rumbled, making it difficult to eat. He seemed to think everything was fine, as his reaction mirrored mine. I wondered if he had stomach issues, but it turned out he was eating without much enjoyment. Perhaps my suspicions were unfounded. But the urge to search his briefcase still lingered, as it could potentially provide insight into his loyalty. "I'm only going to Denton, so I'll be leaving tomorrow morning at 7:30, he mentioned. "I need something to keep me going until I return on Friday," he added playfully, giving me a wink. I responded in a similar playful manner, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. To my surprise, he blushed in response. His comment about bringing his briefcase home the night before his trip suggested he wouldn't be stopping at the office before heading to the airport. Given his seemingly genuine attitude about the upcoming trip in front of our children and me, one might assume that either he hadn't been involved in any infidelity during his travels, or he had become skilled at concealing such behavior. I hoped to uncover the truth when I examined the contents of his briefcase on the evening before his planned trip. Robert returned home in high spirits. He parked his car next to mine in the garage as usual and appeared visibly excited. This left me wondering if his excitement was due to our conversation or if there was another reason behind it. Upon entering the house, he didn't bring his briefcase with him, assuming it was still in the car. I was busy preparing dinner, so we sat down at the table. He casually asked if I could retrieve his suitcase from the garage after we finished eating. "Certainly," I replied, trying not to show any signs of suspicion. "Are you all set for your trip?" he asked, trying to reassure me. "Oh yes, it's a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for the journey. I'll pack an overnight bag with the essentials," he said to maintain a sense of normalcy. I inquired, "Do you have any plans while you're away?" "No, the kids and I will stick to our usual daily routine during the week. Maybe we can plan something family-friendly for the weekend," he replied, showing enthusiasm for the idea. "Sounds like a plan," I responded genuinely. After we finished dinner, he kindly helped me clear the table in the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher. Once we were done, he headed to the bedroom to pack his things, while I made my way to the garage to retrieve his suitcase. Upon inspecting the car, I didn't find the briefcase inside, leading me to believe it was securely placed in the trunk. Expecting this, I had already devised a plan to access it later in the evening. When I returned to the bedroom with his suitcase, I casually asked, "Do you know where the car keys are?" "My tire seems to be slowly losing air. If I take it to the station, Paul can fix it right away." For a brief moment, he appeared puzzled, but then reached for his wallet, handing me the car keys. He proposed an alternative, saying, "Could you just use the spare tire? It's meant for emergencies." Taking a resolute stance, I responded, "Yes, the spare tire is for emergencies, but we have enough time to properly fix this. I think that is the best course of action." I hurried back to the garage before he could change his mind. Swiftly, I drove his car out of the garage and headed to the local service station owned by my friend Paul from school. Pulling up in front of one of the service bays, I honked my horn to get his attention. Paul noticed me and opened the bay door, allowing me to drive in before closing it behind me. "What's going on, buddy?" Paul asked curiously. "My tire was supposed to be fixed here, but I needed a little time to check something else," I replied. Sensing that I might have some issues at home, he asked, "Trouble at home, buddy?" "Maybe," I admitted reluctantly, opening the trunk and retrieving Robert's briefcase. Placing it on a nearby workbench, I unlocked it. Paul, realizing a customer needed him, simply said, "Well, I have a customer, so take your time, my friend." Nodding to Paul, he returned to the small shop attached to his station. I began to search the briefcase meticulously, ensuring that I did not disturb anything. My hands explored the pockets on the lid unnecessarily, and to my shock, I discovered a package that drew my attention. When I removed it, my heart sank as I realized it was an open package of contraceptives, with about 3 pieces missing. My worst fears were confirmed. I carefully placed the package back where I found it and closed the briefcase once more. I stashed it in the trunk and secured it just as Paul returned. "Did you find what you were looking for? What's going on?" he asked with evident curiosity. "I'm afraid so," I replied, my voice tinged with a mix of disappointment and sadness. "Mind if I stay here a bit longer? Perhaps you could check the tire pressure while I pretend to have resolved the issue." Paul gave me a curious look but complied without saying a word. He truly was a loyal friend. While he attended to the tire pressure, I drove out of the bay and pulled up at a gas station. I filled the tank with fuel, unsure of when I would do that for Robert again. My thoughts were filled with gratitude toward Paul for his understanding as I made my way back home. As I pulled into the garage, a sense of darkness seemed to envelop my thoughts, and panic began to intensify, fueled by anger and frustration. It was difficult to grasp how he could betray our marriage, our children, and me in such a manner. Amid the receding emotions, I shifted my focus to planning my next step. To secure custody of our children, I needed concrete evidence of his infidelity and misconduct. Despite his shortcomings as a partner, I acknowledged his role as a good father. The children deserved a paternal figure in their lives. While visitation rights would likely be granted, my ultimate goal was to gain full legal custody. He would have to explain the reasons behind our divorce to his sister and friends. As I entered the house, I called out from the bedroom saying, "Everything is set. It was just a minor issue with a nail." "Okay, thanks," he replied, still avoiding eye contact. Seeking solace, I went to the kitchen for a beer and then settled in the family room with the kids, who were absorbed in watching a TV show. About 30 minutes later, Robert joined us in the room and sat beside me on the couch. By then, my emotions had settled, but a deep sadness washed over me as I realized our once happy family was soon to be a thing of the past. To my surprise, Robert moved closer and snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear, "Are you ready for tonight?" After taking a sip of beer, I replied, "I think so, but I have a stomach ache." Robert sympathetically responded, "Oh, that's too bad, honey." Holding on to me, Robert softly said, "I love you," and I instinctively put my arm around his shoulders. Grappling with mixed feelings, despite his betrayal, there was still a hint of affection from him. I could not help but wonder why he did it. Was it for excitement or a need for more connection than I could provide? I might never fully understand, but what was clear was the damage to my trust in him. We put the kids to bed together, and as he kissed our little ones good night, I could not help but look at him, knowing that by morning he would be gone. Their young minds were already accustomed to his frequent travels, so their unease was minimal. That night we made love, but it lacked the usual passion. Sensing my distress, Robert asked anxiously, "Is your stomach still bothering you, dear?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, but I can handle it." Desperately hoping he would choose our love and marriage over the upcoming trip, I asked, "Do you need to go on this trip?" Deep down, I wished it were all just a nightmare that would vanish. He sighed and replied apologetically, "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to wrap things up and return home as soon as I can. I'm looking forward to the weekend with all of you." With a heavy heart, I sighed and said, "Okay, honey, it's time to get some sleep. You have to get up early for your flight. I'll take a quick shower now so I won't have to worry about it in the morning." "Okay," he replied, heading to the shower. An impulse led me to inspect his suitcase to see what he had packed. Though the clothes on top seemed businesslike, I was surprised to find, upon closer examination, a selection of his most seductive lingerie and a small black cocktail dress in which he always looked irresistible. Respecting his personal space, I put everything back as I found it and closed the suitcase. The sight of those items confirmed my suspicions and deepened my despair. My mind raced with thoughts of his intentions for the trip. Was he planning to meet someone? How long had this been going on? These questions swirled in my head, making it difficult to think clearly. As he finished his shower and got ready for bed, I did my best to maintain a facade of normalcy. I couldn't let on that I knew anything, not yet. I needed more proof, something concrete that I could use in court if it came to that. The next morning, as he left for the airport, I kissed him goodbye, my heart heavy with the knowledge of his betrayal. I watched him drive away, feeling a mix of sorrow and determination. It was time to take action to protect my children and myself from further hurt. I resolved to gather the evidence I needed and confront him when the time was right. Until then, I had to stay strong for my kids and keep our lives as stable as possible amidst the storm that was brewing. I carefully returned everything to its place, closed the suitcase, and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep that night, and when I heard Robert stirring around 500 in the morning, I remained in bed, choosing not to bid him farewell as was our custom. I felt a mix of weariness and sadness. Bending down to kiss me on the cheek before leaving, he inquired, "Still not feeling well, honey?" I simply nodded, struggling to express the turmoil within me. With the sound of the garage door closing, I finally got out of bed and made my way to the shower. I knew the day ahead would be filled with challenges. After seeing the kids off to school and having breakfast, I turned to the phone book to search for private detective services in the yellow pages. My main criteria were to locate an agency with a nationwide presence, preferably in the city Robert was heading to. I reached out to several agencies and eventually found one with a branch in his destination area. I set up a meeting with them for the same morning, hoping they could provide the necessary information. Next on my agenda was finding a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a specific lawyer, so I found his contact details and gave him a call. I arranged an appointment for the afternoon, hoping this lawyer could guide me through the challenging process we were about to face. When I arrived at the private investigator's office, I discussed my concerns and arranged for Robert to be surveilled on the evening he was away. I provided them with a photo of Robert and details of his travel route to aid in their identification. They assured me they would gather photos and compile a report on his activities as soon as his business day concluded. To ensure seamless communication, they agreed to send information via email to their Denton office and promised to provide a comprehensive report by Monday morning. Satisfied with their commitment, I made a substantial upfront payment for their services. They informed me they might not be able to capture photographs, but they would strive to provide as many incriminating photos as possible. I agreed that it would suffice. My afternoon meeting with the lawyer proceeded as anticipated. He explained that in our state, divorce follows a no-fault principle, meaning there's no need to assign blame. However, given that I am the primary caregiver for our children, it's likely I will be granted custody. I needed to understand that Robert would receive substantial visitation rights for our children. Furthermore, our property would be divided equally, with both sides getting an even split of 50. Alimony wouldn't be necessary due to our similar incomes, but since I would have custody of the children, Robert would be obligated to pay child support. As for the inheritance he obtained, it held no significance to me, and he needed to retain it for himself. My top priority was the well-being of our children. I instructed the lawyer to prepare the necessary documents to be delivered to Robert on Monday, citing irreconcilable differences. I also asked him to agree that Robert would vacate our house immediately upon our divorce. The lawyer confirmed that as the children's guardian, I had the authority to make this request. It was decided that once the children reached 18, we would sell the house, and the proceeds would be divided between us. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of contentment, realizing that life would move forward for me and the children, while Robert would have to face the consequences of his betrayal. At that moment, I didn't take immediate action concerning our finances, insurance, or other legal matters. I assumed I'd have sufficient time to address these issues after serving him with divorce papers. Given his inheritance, I believed he wouldn't have to be concerned about his share of our joint savings. When it was time for school to conclude, I headed home to catch the bus. On Friday afternoon, when Robert returned, I kindly offered to take care of his laundry, but he politely declined, insisting he would handle it later. I couldn't help but grin, recognizing how playfully mischievous I had been. Deep down, I fully comprehended why he preferred to manage the laundry himself. As the evening settled in, I watched Robert move around the house with an odd sense of detachment. It was as if he was already a ghost in our home, his betrayal casting a shadow over every interaction. Despite my inner turmoil, I maintained a facade of normalcy for the sake of our children. The weekend ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to gather the evidence needed to protect my kids and myself. The path forward was clear, even if it was filled with heartache and uncertainty. Robert needed to keep his extramarital affairs concealed at all costs. Later, as we lay in bed, Robert expressed worry about my ongoing stomach issues and suggested I see a doctor. "This has been persisting for too long," he emphasized. I playfully responded, letting him know that I intended to try a new medication recommended by a friend to address my persistent stomach problems. I expressed optimism that this would resolve the issue and bring him back to me soon. When we embraced, he whispered that he missed me greatly. On Monday, as the kids left for school and Robert headed to work, I received a call from the detective agency informing me that they had a report ready. I told them I'd be there shortly, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting down with the office manager to discuss the details. The office manager informed me that a report with attached photos had been faxed from Denton that morning. He admitted he hadn't had time to read the entire report, but upon a quick scan and a glance at the photos, it seemed highly incriminating. I took a copy of the report and started reading its contents. The subject of the report was identified as Robert Green. According to the report records, the surveillance of Robert began at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16th, in the lobby of the Denton Marriott Hotel. His identity was confirmed by comparing a photo obtained from the local office. Upon closer examination of the report, it turned out that he was wearing a company badge, further confirming his identity. Moreover, the report detailed the movements of the subject and noted he was carrying a briefcase when he entered the elevator. A staff member accompanied him and verified his arrival at room 214 at 5:23 p.m. It's important to note that the report emphasized that the subject was alone at that time. Additionally, the report included a photograph labeled Exhibit 1A, showing Robert dressed professionally before entering the room. When looking at the photo, it was clear he still wore his rings. The photo was taken discreetly using a mobile phone. The report stated that the agents had rented a room across from the subject's room. At 6:31 p.m., they received a signal that Robert had left his room and was heading for the elevator. A minute later, at 6:32 p.m., he exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted he was dressed as described in Exhibit 1B. Upon examining Exhibit 1B, it became evident that Robert was wearing a small black cocktail dress paired with high-heeled shoes. He was also adorned with a necklace I had given him for our 10th anniversary celebration. However, what stood out the most was the absence of wedding rings on his left hand. The photo clearly showed he wasn't wearing them. The photo identified as Exhibit 1D displayed Robert and a woman in a tight embrace, engaged in a passionate kiss while seated in a booth. The intensity of their connection was visible in the picture. At 8:51 p.m., the report noted that both individuals left the restaurant. They then took the elevator and ascended to Robert's floor. Another photo, labeled Exhibit 1E, captured the moment when Robert and the woman entered his room, specifically room 214. In this image, Robert appeared slightly intoxicated, but undeniably pleased with the evening's events. At 11:13 p.m., the woman exited Robert's room and left the building. The report included the license plate number of a car registered to Melissa K. Roberts, residing at 1524 Elm Drive in Denton. Notably, Melissa K. Roberts was married and had 2 young children. As I delved further into the report's details, it became evident that Robert repeated his actions the following night with another person. The detailed surveillance logs and accompanying photos painted a clear and painful picture of his infidelity. Each interaction was meticulously documented, leaving little room for doubt about his actions. Reading through the final pages of the report, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and sadness. The man I had loved and trusted had been living a double life, deceiving me and our children. It was now clear that our marriage had been a facade hiding his secret affairs. The next steps were evident. I needed to confront Robert with the evidence and take legal action to protect my family and myself. The pain was unbearable, but I knew that moving forward was the only way to find healing and rebuild my life. The report bore the signature of an investigator from Denton. This revelation filled me with deep anxiety and resentment. It became clear that Robert was leading a promiscuous life while he was away from home. I couldn't come to terms with his actions. It was a betrayal that exceeded my worst expectations. Even the fact that Robert had lost his wedding rings didn't stop him from being careless. After settling the bill with the private detective, I thanked them and left, making sure to take 2 additional copies of the report recorded on a CD to keep them safe. Once I got back home, I wasted no time and immediately called my divorce attorney. I asked about the status of the divorce papers, and the attorney confirmed they were ready for filing. Without hesitation, I instructed them to initiate the filing process and specifically requested that the papers be served to Robert publicly at his workplace the following day. The attorney assured me that this could be done smoothly and asked for his workplace address, which I promptly provided. My intentions were clear. I aimed to humiliate him during the legal proceedings. Handing him the divorce papers at his workplace not only satisfied my desire for revenge, but also served as a form of justice for his actions. That night, there was no love between us. Robert seemed to sense that something was wrong, perhaps suspecting that I had discovered something unsettling. Though he didn't directly voice his concerns, he expressed hope for my quick recovery. Interestingly, he also appeared somewhat reserved, but I chose not to comment on it and simply ignored it. The next morning, I woke up early after a night of little sleep. I immersed myself in work on the computer until I heard the children waking up, and then I went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. After the meal, I said goodbye to Robert when he left for work. He approached me for a hug and a kiss, but I responded with a half-playful embrace, encouraging him to leave quickly. At that moment, I sensed he might have had an inkling of what awaited him. As I closed the door behind him, tears welled up in his eyes, and he whispered, "I love you." After his departure, profound sadness washed over me, and I felt an urge to release my tears. Yet I quickly composed myself as the children required my attention, and I needed to prepare them for the school bus. Around 10:45 a.m., the phone rang, disrupting our morning routine. Displaying Robert's workplace on the caller ID, I answered the call without uttering a word. There was a brief pause as the caller realized I wasn't inclined to engage in conversation. In a trembling voice and a whisper, Robert said, "I'm sorry." Shortly after, the line fell silent, and I remained silent as well. Robert did return home that night, and I wondered if he continued his deceitful game, seemingly indifferent to his spouse. While I recognized my anger was justified, I also considered that I might have been overly harsh on him. The children, disheartened by their father's absence, wondered where he was. To uplift their spirits, I invited them to have dinner at a local cafe. By the time we returned home after dinner, the kids were exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Robert called with a request. "Honey, can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" Initially, a sense of guilt welled up within me, but it quickly dissipated. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 900 and noon? Then the kids and I won't be here. Regarding our conversation, I made it clear that I'd speak with you one-on-one in my lawyer's office only after you sign and return the divorce documents. Then, I'll listen to whatever you have to say." There was a sob on the line before Robert answered. "Good." Shortly after, The phone fell silent again. He signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later our marriage officially came to an end. It turned out that he became pregnant during the affair. Unfortunately, when he attempted to conceal it from his last lover, contraception failed, considering it was near his childbearing age. Even if I hadn't found out about his infidelity through the lost devices, the truth would probably have come out eventually. There were rumors that he had started dating again. If he ever gets close to getting married again, I've thought about honestly warning his future spouse about his unfaithfulness. It seems unnecessary for him to deceive and hurt another person. We had a meeting, and during our conversation in my lawyer's office, I shared my thoughts with him. He pleaded with me to reconsider the divorce decision. He talked about how difficult it was for him not to have unrestricted access to our children. However, I explained that I couldn't trust him anymore. Then he mentioned that he had seen a psychologist who diagnosed him with nymphomania. He assured me that his impulses were now under control. Despite his explanations, I told him that it wasn't enough for me. Even if he claimed to have his urges in check, the fact that he hadn't sought help earlier indicated a lack of proactive effort on his part. If he had addressed his cravings from the beginning, he might not have found himself in the current situation. When I left the lawyer's office, he continued to cry. Having recently reconnected with a school friend who keeps me updated, I learned that he works at a nightclub. He mentioned seeing my ex-husband at the club where he works on several weekend nights. He frequents the club with different women and behaves provocatively. I was deeply hurt that my children had such an irresponsible father. Perhaps my ex-husband never recovered from nymphomania. A friend of Robert's also called me and informed me that Robert was in poor health. She said my ex-husband needed my assistance because he had contracted herpes. Meanwhile, he continued his promiscuous lifestyle. I sympathized with him, but conveyed that I couldn't offer any help, nor did I want to. Robert chose this lifestyle and its associated health issues. I began dating again, and it seems I found someone special. This woman, around my age and divorced herself, discovered her ex-husband's infidelity and didn't tolerate such behavior. She possesses strength and resilience, qualities I genuinely admire. It seems that my children also like her. I believe this is a natural progression, and it's only a matter of time before I consider taking our relationship to a new level. Robert's betrayal changed my life forever, but it also taught me the value of trust and the strength to rebuild. The scars remain, but they serve as a reminder of what I've overcome. Yet, as I move forward with my life, a part of me can't help but wonder what truly drove him to such deception. Was it really just a moment of weakness? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? Perhaps in time, the full truth will reveal itself. Until then, I keep my eyes open, always aware that sometimes the real story lies hidden just beneath the facade.